Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Shalom Aleichem. So as always, we give a little charity in our tzedakah box. Remember, I need to remember this. We need to empty it out periodically and just give it to whomever you want, whatever charity, whatever organization, whatever homeless person, whatever you feel is a valid cause. Okay, so last class we dealt with the four-letter name. We dealt with breaking apart the word Bereshit. Started to talk a little bit about this idea of Maaseh Bereshit, the workings of creation, Maaseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. How and why did God create the world? How and why does God sustain the world? And I thought it'd be nice if maybe each class that we're doing this, we add one or two verses that we just talk about briefly at the beginning of the class to see how there's so much depth and mysticism hidden in plain sight in the Torah. Just thought it'd be a nice little thing. And so what we're going to do this week is just start it off with a little bit of piece of that. It's what is generally considered a very confusing piece, but it's not when you understand it. So that light's in my eyes, so it's going to be hard to see this now. But so we have, if we go to Genesis 1:27, Bereshit 1:27, this is where God is making the universe and making the world. And it says, and God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over the animal, the whole earth and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. This is on its face, a very, very confusing verse. It's less confusing in the Hebrew. So we're going to explore it a little bit. Because it's confusing because it's the idea of it's switching back and forth between singular text or singular conjugation and plural. Well, then, can we turn down that light just a little bit? That's just really, I don't know if it's needed, it's just so bright, I can't see me. Thank you. I hope that didn't make it too dim for people. So I was starting to see spots of colors, and they weren't good colors. So it's flipping back and forth between our image, we created him, they, man and woman, and it's a little confusing. First thing to understand is up until this point, when God creates the human, the term that is used for man is actually ha-adam. I put it up here, ha-adam. Now in Hebrew, the word ha means the prefix ha means the. So the word for table is shulchan. So to say the table, you would say ha-shulchan. The word for book is sefer, so you would say ha-sefer, meaning the book. So that's kind of what the first piece of it. God creates the human being. He doesn't create Adam. He creates Ha-Adam. And then later on, God takes Ha-Adam, this being called the human being, and casts Ha-Adam to sleep, and then splits Ha-Adam, and Ha-Adam, the human being, becomes Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. So if we look at this verse and this understanding, and the verse later on that goes when they fall asleep and they're split at the rib, it does not mean that Eve came from Adam's rib. For centuries, because of mistranslations, religion became very patriarchal, based on the idea that God created Adam and then created Eve from Adam's rib. But that's not what happened. God created Ha-Adam, the human being. And what our sages have taught us is that Ha-Adam is a human being that is both male and female. So it's kind of like on one side it's male and on one side it's female, and they're fastened together at the back at the rib. Okay, and then when God puts them to sleep, they split. And if you look at it that way, if we look at this verse that way, that God is creating a human being that is both male and female at first, but they have no relationship. They're facing opposite ways. And then when God puts them to sleep, they can now have relationship. If we look at that as the understanding, which is our sage's understanding, then now the verse makes a lot of sense. So let's say it again. So God created the human being in his image, in the image of God. He created him, male and female, he created them. So it's just, I want to start each of these classes with just a little bit of introduction of the verse and to see how there's so much depth in each of the verses. Orlando just grunted. Did we just lose connection? Oh, we're good. Okay. So just to start off and to see that everything is hidden right there in Torah. We just have to lekabel. We have to receive. So one of the things we touched on briefly last week was this concept of hineni. So I'd like you to get your handout. If you don't have the handout, it is on your Facebook or YouTube page. You can download it. You can download it from our website at nersimcha.org. And we're going to just go through a little bit about this concept of hineni. So throughout the Bible, God asks Ayecha, means where are you? And they respond, the different leaders, whether it's Adam or Abraham, it's Moses or Hezekiah, respond back, Hineni, I am present. This is an extremely important concept. And as I said last class, I believe that all Jewish ritual, all Jewish practices are designed to help us be present. But what does that mean? What does it mean to really be present, to show up? To have the courage, the willingness to say I am present, but also to have the ability, the consciousness to really be present in the moment. It's the old teaching that the only time is now and the only place is here. Everything else is a distraction. That is the only place. Neurophysiologists have determined that when we are present, fully present, there is a shift in our neurochemistry. Dakila and Newberg, with their book, The Mystical Mind, really go over this a little bit. They can track in the neurochemistry what happens when someone is in the zone or a heightened state of awareness. The sympathetic and parasympathetic systems both shut down. So fight or flight shut down, and it overflows into a sense of unitary sense of being. And the hippocampus, which is right about here, becomes 400% more active. Okay, it's where we have a tefillin knot. When we have our tefillin. This is what happens in the brain chemistry when someone is present, when they're in the zone athletically, when they're having an orgasm, dreaming, taking a psychotropic in a meditative state, in an ecstatic dancing state, in an ecstatic musical state, kirtan singing, any of those kind of things. We get into a state of presence. That's what happens physically. But let's talk about what some of our sages, how they discuss hineni. And again, I'm going to look towards our handout. As we see very early on, God says to Adam, and he said to him, where are you? And Adam will respond, hineni. Let's go down about halfway through page 1. Rabbi Avraham Isaac Kook was really this amazing rabbi in the early 20th century. He was the first chief rabbi of Palestine, Israel. And he brought together, he had the knowledge, wisdom, charisma, personal power to bring together the secular Zionists in early Israel and the religious observant Jews as well. He told the observant Jews, you're the spirit. He told the secular Zionists, you're the body, and we need both. And so he was able to come together. We don't find that happening so much in modern day Israel between the ultra-Orthodox and the secular, but he actually had that ability. He was a great philosopher, a great mystic, a great teacher, a number of amazing books and writings. And here are a couple of quotes. He has this wonderful quote. He says, hineni, the soul thinks without thoughts, acts without action. To be so present that you're acting without trying to act, you're just being. You're not thinking cognitively, you're just thinking without thought. You're totally present. It's kind of this, what happens when someone hears lightning or thunder, or when someone is walking in the desert and they suddenly hear a rattlesnake. It doesn't matter who you are. You hear that rattle of a rattlesnake and you are present in that moment, in that place, at that time. I think it's a great idea that we're trying to lead Jewish ritual and Jewish ceremony, Jewish understandings are trying to lead us to that kind of awareness. He also said, here I am. Hineni suggests humility and zeal at the same times. At times, it is not necessary to be afraid of greatness, which inspires someone to do great things. All humility is based on such a holy greatness. The idea that being present is our natural state, it's what we need to do, it's where we should be, and we don't need to be embarrassed about it, but rather we need to embrace it, we need to look towards it, we need to do it with zeal and with alacrity. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel made the great comment that presence is not a concept, but a situation. He was very relationship-oriented. So it's not just about being present inside myself, but present inside myself with everything else at the same time. Again, like a branch, as we discussed last class, a branch connected to a tree. The branch is present in being a branch and alone. And on the other hand, it's connected to the tree, to the leaves, to the roots, to the earth, to the sky, to everything else. There is an understanding, I think it's phrased best by the Baal Shem Tov, that when you're present, you're not concerned with being embarrassed. You're not concerned with what do other people think. You're being fully present. And so he has this wonderful quote we find on page 2: to be indifferent to others, loving you or hating you, for their love or their hatred means nothing. Because if we're doing what God put us here to do, what the reaction that creates inside other people is insignificant. It really is. I'm very blessed. I get all sorts of wonderful complimentary emails and calls at different times, and I thank you for those. And I also get all sorts of real vitriolic hate mail. And on a certain level, I thank you for those too. It's just part of, if you're present, then that's going to bring up some people that are going to be happy with that. It will inspire them to be present. And it's going to inspire other people to reject and be very hate-filled. It's kind of like when you hold up a mirror to someone. If they like the reflection, they're very happy. If they don't like the reflection, they either run away or they break the mirror. They say the mirror is not an accurate reflection. To be present means not to be concerned with anyone else's feelings or thoughts towards you, but rather to be present, to be in that moment, to be in that zone. There was a baseball movie a number of years ago with Kevin Costner, I believe it was called The Perfect Game. And he's a pitcher and he's going through all sorts of things and doesn't realize till the 7th or 8th inning he's throwing a perfect game. And as soon as you realize you're in the zone, that's the fastest way to get out of it. But when you're really present, you're only aware with this, that you're really in that one moment of time and of space. And it is so important. And Judaism has all sorts of techniques to get us to that understanding and that level of awareness. So that's kind of what it means to say Hineni. In Judaism, we do that through our rituals, our prayer services. Understand that our prayer services were designed effectively between the 6th and the 9th century. The Siddur, prayer book, has basically remained unchanged since the 9th century, 9th, 10th century. And what had happened, the way that they built this prayer book, this order, Siddur, which meaning order of services, order of prayers, is they took the services that were in the time of the temple. Now imagine you're going to the temple 2,800 years ago, and you're going to this temple, and it's just all this shamanic drama. It's really larger than life, this amazing physical structure, the sound of the music, of the chanting of the Levites, the smells of the incense and the sacrifices, the calls and all the noises, and everything leads to this level of heightened awareness. And when you went to the temple, just like when someone walks into the Church of Notre Dame or into a great cathedral, Peter and Paul in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, excuse me, when I was there, it was still Leningrad. You walk in and you have this sense of awe, truly of awe. That happened in the times of the temple. But then our people dispersed, and after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 of the Common Era, we went all over. And it really was a destruction. Our sages had to determine, well, how do we keep Judaism alive? What do we do so that Judaism can still create, Jewish ritual can still create that experience within the participant, within the congregant? And so they assembled this Siddur, this prayer book. And the order of the prayers was designed that if you really understood what was going on in each prayer, it would take you on a journey, on a spiritual journey. Same as any journey of any ritual in any indigenous culture or anything else would. It would take you from an awareness of physicality, with a little bit of spirituality, a little bit more, until you're just aware of the spiritual and not even aware of the physical. And then from that place, you would be able to hear the words of Torah reading. So they created this order, and that's one way that we help, that our sages have designed, or this tradition, this faith tradition has designed processes so that people can achieve being present. They could say hideni, what the Buddhists would call mindfulness. That's one. The observance of our rituals, not just our services, but our holidays, lighting the Hanukkah candles, lighting the Shabbat candles, lighting the Havdalah candle. The process of Yom Kippur, the process of Rosh Hashanah, the process of Purim, all these things, so we would have an experience that would help us to be present, to be aware, to be thinking without thought, acting without action. A major part as well is this concept called hisbodedus or hitbodedut, meaning meditation. Now, in Judaism, there are two types of meditation that are split into two categories traditionally. And both are to help us be more present in the moment, more aware, and simultaneously aware both ourselves and the greater universe. Hilahavut means to be inflamed, passionate. When you're doing that dancing and you just get lost in doing a hora over and over in a circle dance. When you're chanting, and you get lost in the nigun. We teach that higher than words is music, is song. Higher than song with words is music without words. Nigun. Highest yet is where you're not even singing. You've transcended that and you're just shaking. Your bones, we say, are vibrating. That's all hitlahavut. That's difficult to teach and to share in a normal circumstance, let alone online. The other type we can share a little bit, called hitbodedut or hisbodedus. Comes from the word both bod and boded, meaning both alone and a branch. And it's the idea of being like a branch, being alone, and yet being aware of everything, and to be doing it to ourselves. It's more of an internal meditative process. It is a process of, and there are many, many techniques. And again, I recommend that book, Jewish Meditation, which is right here. This is I believe, the single best book to learn meditation. The single best book. I think it explains it really well, and it's very straight ahead, and it's not. There's no esoterica. It's really written in a very, very simplistic way, in a very deep way at the same time. Part of Rabbi Kaplan, of blessed memory, part of his genius. But hisbodedus, meditation, is really a key part of Judaism. So I want to study a little bit about quotes about meditation, and then kind of go over it a little bit. So there's a wonderful, wonderful quote. We find it on page 2, and it's both a quote about meditation. It's also a quote about being present. It's again from Rabbi Heschel. At the moment in which an artist is absorbed in playing a concerto, the thought of applause, fame, or remuneration is far from his mind. His complete attention, his whole being is involved in that piece of music. Should any extraneous thought enter his mind, it would arrest his concentration and mar the purity of his playing. The reward may have been on his mind when he negotiated with his agent, but during the performance, it is the music that claims his complete concentration. This is what it means to be in the zone, and we get there through, again, meditative states. Now, meditation builds upon itself. There's this beautiful quote from the book of Job that water wears away stone. Think of our souls like a stringed instrument, like a violin. When you put a new string on a violin, within 5 minutes, it's out of tune. You tune it back up, and now it stays in tune for 10 minutes. Then it goes out of tune. You tune it back up, and maybe it stays for half an hour. Eventually, you can put a string on if it's been played a lot. It may stay for days, weeks, or even months and never go out of tune. The same is true with our soul. The more that we tune it, the more that it will stay in tune, and the easier it will always be to tune and to stay there. So think of that image as you practice meditation. We have learned, neurophysiologists have learned that if we meditate 12 minutes a day, twice a day, that it very quickly changes our entire consciousness. That there seems to be some sort of magical happening that happens at 12 minutes. Once you hit 12 minutes, it actually changes everything. Significantly different than 11 minutes. Once you're past 12, you're on the other side of the line. So that's some understanding of meditation. There's a wonderful quote by my friend and teacher, Rabbi Avraham Greenbaum. You find on the bottom of page 3, excessive tension is often a factor in faulty and inhibited breathing, which can give rise to low energy levels lack of clarity, nervousness, and a lowering of resistance to disease. It is most valuable to learn to breathe freely and fully, and to make it a habit to pause periodically in the course of one's daily activities in order to re energize with a few long breaths. Breathing is one of the keys of Hisbodedus, of Jewish meditative techniques. Now, the word for breath, the word for wind, the word for soul, they're all related to each other. Ruach, which means wind, it also means spirit. Neshama can mean breath, it can usually mean soul. And so breathing becomes a very, very large part of any Hisbodedus technique that we will explore. If you go to page 15, it looks like this. You need to find your handout. Page number should be on the top left. I'm not sure they all came out properly. So now I guess it says page 15 on it. So thanks to Orlando. There's some things about meditation. First of all, there's a number of pages that go into teachings about meditation. These are Rebbe Nachman teachings, as shared by Rabbi Avraham. And there you can just study them on your own. From the smallest to the greatest, it is impossible to be a truly good person without Hisbodedus, without meditation. The idea that meditation is really the key to do even before we pray. And it's all sorts of quotes about and teachings about that. But let's look at page 15, where it says meditate, Hisbodedus or Hisbodedus. It is best to meditate and pray in the meadows outside the city. Go to a grassy field, and the grass will awaken your heart. It's again a teaching of Rabbi Nachman. And the idea is, before he would even do his morning prayers, which an observant Jew does every morning, before that, he'd go outside into the fields to listen to the song of the grasses, to listen to the song of the trees, of nature. You go out into nature, whether it's in the morning, or you can also do it in the evening when it's quiet. There's a custom among many Kabbalists to go out after midnight, between midnight and dawn, because the world is dreaming. It's quiet. You can really listen. Remember, the watchword of our faith is Shema. Shema Yisrael, listen, you people of Israel. It's in the early morning. It's late at night. You can truly listen. It's a really good time to go out and meditate, focus on breath, and to achieve a heightened state of awareness. We continue again. This is still page 15. You cannot nullify yourself in this manner except through Hisbodedus, meditation. When you seclude yourself and express yourself privately to your master, to God, you can annihilate all your evil thoughts and desires. You can thus ultimately nullify your entire physical being and become one with your root, one with your soul. We get so stuck. We get so stuck worrying about the Narshkeit, the craziness. We get so stuck worrying about mortgage payment or a car payment, about a virus or a mask, that we lose who we are. Hisbodedus is returning to who we really are. Our soul knows that it existed before our birth, will exist after our death. Our soul knows our place in the world. Our soul knows our tikkun, what we are here to repair, what we are here to do. But we lose that a lot of the time. We're thinking about craziness, things that we really don't need to think about. We're worrying about things. Rabbi Nachman has a great teaching. The only thing you should worry about is that you worry too much. But we do. We worry about stuff all the time. And it prevents us from being in tune with our soul. It's kind of like, think of our soul being a sun and how we walk in the world orbiting around that sun. And for some people who are really out of balance, that's just some weird orbit that's sometimes close, sometimes far, and it's all over the map. For other people, it's like an oval. And sometimes how they walk in the world is very close to who their soul is, maybe when they're with their family or when they're late at night. And other times it's far away from who they are. They know what's right or what's wrong, but sometimes they ignore what their soul tells them about what is right and wrong, because they're so caught in this physical world of Asiyah, this bottom hay of God's name, remember, that we talked about last week. But the more that we meditate, the more we take that orbit around our soul and make it into a circle, and then bring the circle closer and closer and closer, so that we can walk in the world as an expression of who we really are. We all get stuck in stuff. I mean, I'm sure there are people who don't, but Tzaddikim don't. Baal Shem Tov, and there are those few enlightened beings throughout history and different traditions, like Yogi Bhajan or the Buddha, whomever it may be, that don't. But for most of us, at least some of the time, we get knocked out of orbit. Maybe because we knock ourselves out, or because something else happened to us, and we are at the effect of things as opposed to being at the effect. Some sort of event happens, and it so disturbs us, it throws us out of orbit. Meditation is a way to always get back to that orbit, so that it's a nice balanced circle as opposed to all over the map. I'm going to continue on page 15. You must therefore make sure to set aside a specific time each day to review your life calmly. Consider what you are doing and ponder whether it is worthwhile for you to devote your life to it. It's so sad how many people, when they really pause, they say, I'm devoting my life to doing this, but I hate this. They are, what they really want to do is take care of their family. And so they want to make sure their family has a nice home. And so they start to work, and they start to make money, and they start to invest. Then they start to worry about their investments in the stock market and the options market. And then they start to buy real estate and be part of a consortium of people buying real estate. And their whole lives are based around making money. And in doing so, they've lost themselves. They no longer have time for their wife and children, their husband and children, which were the original reasons they were doing what they were doing in the first place. I have a personal rule. I spend Shabbat with my family. We spend Shabbat together. Whether it's services, whether at home, whether we're out of town, we spend Shabbat together. So when I get asked to do a destination wedding that's out of town, the first thing I say to the couple is, I want to make sure you understand. It's a Saturday night wedding, and it's in Cabo San Lucas. It's in Washington, D.C. It's wherever it is. And these are all, I do these kind of things. And the first thing I say to them is, look, you got to take my wife and children, because you've got to pay for their trip, because I don't spend Shabbat away. I'm not making money so I can spend Shabbat away from my family. And it doesn't matter what you pay me if it's taking me away from that experience of spending the Sabbath on Friday night with my family. And I've turned down weddings in the Dominican Republic and in Puerto Vallarta and all over the world because I would not buckle on that. Shabbat is our family. That's when we are together. One way or the other, we are together. There's only been one exception. It was a choice. It was actually a wedding in Hong Kong. So full disclosure, it was a wedding in Hong Kong, and I was flying in literally to do the wedding and fly back, and it didn't make sense for my boys, who were very little, to fly to Hong Kong. So I asked them, "Are you okay if I spend this one Shabbat away, and we'll do Shabbat via Skype?" So we did it that way. It's the only time. I don't spend time away from my family on Shabbat. Why am I going to make money to enhance the antithesis of my values? So we need to pause and say, why are we doing what we're doing? Do we love what we're doing? Are we doing and acting in the world the way we want to do that? It's really, really important. That's one of the things meditation allows us to do. Again, on page 15, regarding meditation, this is the best way of coming close to God because it includes everything else. No matter what is lacking in your spiritual life, even if you feel totally remote from God, talk it out, talk to God, and ask God to help you. There are many well-known great tzaddikim, righteous ones, who have said that they achieved their levels only through this practice of meditation. Any intelligent person can see the supreme value of hisbodedus, meditation. It is something that everyone can practice, from the smallest to the greatest. Everyone can talk to God and thereby reach the highest levels of awareness. Unfortunately, in Western culture, we've sort of said that mysticism, being aware of God, having a direct relationship with God, listening to God, receiving from God, like Kabbalah, that's for those people over there. That's for those really wise ones. That's for the really great ones. No. In Judaism, hisbodedus, this is similar in many ways to both Sikhism, it's similar to Buddhism, to Taoism. In our tradition, meditation is a pathway that every human being can do. Every human being can exercise and practice. And it tunes each of our strings, our notes of our soul up. There are a lot of readings that we have here about Hisbodedus and meditation, but I'd like to go over just a little concept. Let me first go over the pages. You will see that from page 15 through page 20 something, 24, I think. Yeah, through 24 are all sorts of quotes and teachings from the Breslov Hasidim, from Rabbi Nachman, from that mystical tradition. And then afterwards, you'll see a number of writings that I actually wrote. They were part of a dissertation. The dissertation was on the spirituality of peak performance, that have techniques, meditative techniques in them. And we're going to go over some of that right now. So breath, as I said, is a real key to meditation. It's a real key to meditation. Something needs to be moved. Oh, am I too soft? Someone was complaining I was too soft. That happens when I teach this topic. When I teach about anti-Semitism and the history of anti-Semitism, I'm too loud. So let's talk a little bit about the relationship and meditation. If we take the word Kabbalah, often, as we discussed last week, a misnomer, not the correct term for Jewish mysticism, but if we take that concept of Kabbalah, it comes from the word lekabel, which means to receive. We place ourselves into a space of an awareness of being open and receiving. That's really what we do, and that's what we do in meditation. As it says on the very front of the handout, it's a quote not from our tradition, but a quote from Yogi Bhajan Khalsa, who brought Kundalini Yoga to this country. We have an initial quote that says, prayer is when the mind is one-pointed and man talks to infinity. Meditation is when the mind becomes totally clean and receptive and infinity talks to the man. That's a beautiful Jewish definition. And we need to be clean and clear and receive. And breath is a very simple way of doing that. So the first thing to do is to recognize and change our viewing perspective. Let me give you an example of that. Most of us believe we are standing on the earth. We're not. I'm not sitting on the earth. None of us are standing on the earth. If we're really honest, we are hanging from the earth, right? The earth is in space and we're hanging off of it, and we're being kept onto the earth by gravity. As one friend once said, gravity is evidence of God's love. But we're all really hanging from it, kept there by gravity. We're not standing on it. Okay? That's reframing. That's changing how our perception is. The first thing to change in terms of getting to a different state, a meditative state, an altered state, is to stop thinking that we breathe and instead to receive. And what do I mean by that? It's a reframing, a reorientation of ourselves, that we are not inhaling the breath. Rather, we're receiving breath that is blown into us by God. We are not exhaling the breath. God is taking the breath from us. That God is constantly giving us mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. It says in the Torah that God breathed the nishmat chayim, the breath of life, into the first human being. And we breathe from then on until God takes the breath the final time in this lifetime. So the first piece when focusing on breath is to stop thinking that we are breathing, but rather we are receiving the breath. One of the most powerful experiences I once had was we went to a place called Two Inch Palms, which is a house this before the kids were born. Alice and I went, and it's one of these spa places, which she loved, and they have massages and they have hot springs and all sorts of stuff. But I had a treatment called Watsu. Watsu is shiatsu in a mineral pool, where the massage therapist is not massaging you. He's literally contracting and expanding your body and taking you underwater. If you try to fight it, it's really horrible because you want to breathe and he's not letting you. He's got you underwater. But if you just surrender and know that he has the awareness of what's going on in your body, then he's contracting you to let the air out, and he's expanding you to let the air in as you're going under and back and forth in water. And it's just, if you surrender to it, it's so amazing. Such a powerful experience. We need to reframe ourselves so that we're not thinking we are inhaling, but rather we're recognizing that God is blowing into us. God is not absent in the equation, but rather it is all because of God. And we're just like a balloon that's being filled up. The air is being taken out. It's being put in. It's being taken out. And one of the fastest ways to change our perception, our awareness, is to pause and realize something. When God blows breath into me, it's God's breath. When I exhale, it's my breath. If I've had garlic pizza, we all know it's my breath, right? So for a moment, as you're sitting wherever you are right now, pause. And as you're being filled with breath, as you are inhaling, for that moment, think about where the breath stops being God's coming into you and it becomes yours. When you think you found the moment, find the smaller moment. Find the microsecond, the millisecond, the microsecond. It's an infinitesimally small place. It's the same place of where seed changes to a plant. It's not a seed, it's not a plant. You can't ever really define it. It's infinitely small. So for a moment, as you're just sitting here breathing, it's always good if you're doing anything meditative or study to change your posture so your posture is nice and vertical so that you can fill up your lungs. Allow yourself to be breathed and try and find the moment as I'm talking with you where the breath becomes yours. Now, most of us, when we breathe, first of all too many people do mouth breathing, and we should always inhale through our nose. Unless you're swimming, we should always inhale through our nose because it allows us to cleanse. It allows the air to be warmer. It allows it to be absorbed into our lungs better. Now, there's three parts of the lobes of our lungs: the bottom, the middle, and the top. In Western culture, all too often we have been taught to just fill this top part of the lobes of our lungs and not to fill the bottom 2/3. Whereas what we really should do is it's like when you pour a liquid into a glass, you fill up the bottom first. You don't fill up the top and then go to the bottom. So what some people call belly breathing. So when you inhale, you want to fill up the bottom part of your lungs first until then the middle part, then the upper part. Okay. Look at any great athlete. They always breathe this way. Look at any great speaker. They breathe that way. Singers will say, I'm breathing from my diaphragm. I push out the diaphragm first. So when you're being breathed, you want to let your bottom part of the lungs fill up first, not the top. Okay, that's the first thing. You want to find that moment when the breath becomes yours. The first technique we're just going to discuss tonight is something called triangle breathing. This is where, and I've made a little diagram here. We inhale, we exhale, and we hold with our lungs empty. Now, most people in Western culture, if you ask them to hold their breath, they'll go like this, and they'll hold with their lungs full. But that's not natural. And if you're a parent or if you've ever been around someone who's dying, you know it's not natural. The natural way, that's based on fear. I want to hold on to it. The natural way to breathe is to inhale, exhale, and hold it with our lungs empty. If you've been around someone dying, you see that their breathing pattern will go inhale, exhale, and then they'll hold it. And that hold becomes longer and longer and longer. And that's one of the ways you know if someone's getting closer to passing away, because that space becomes longer and longer and longer. If you're around a newborn baby inhales, exhales, and then you're sitting there waiting for the baby to inhale again, right? We all have gone through it when they're first-time parents. Right? Every parent that I know has at one point or another, as they're watching their baby breathe, said, okay, when are you going to inhale again? And they get very nervous about it. The natural way is to inhale, to exhale, and to hold it with our lungs empty without fear. So a simple breathing pattern is to think not of me inhaling, but that God's exhaling into me. I'm not exhaling, but God's taking the breath from me, and then I'm holding without any breath inside of me, waiting for God to refill it again and having faith that God will. You know, the opposite of faith is fear. Fear and faith cannot exist in the same place at the same moment. If we're based in fear, we go and we hold it really tight like we're scared. If we're based in faith, then we exhale and we hold it that way. out any air inside of us. So for a moment, try this triangle breathing, where to a count of 4, we're going to inhale through our nose, and then God breathe into us. Exhale through our mouth, and then hold it with our lungs being empty. So again, sit up straight, so you can get the lower parts first. And let God fill up the lower parts of our lungs. We're going to inhale through our nose and exhale through our mouth. What in Qigong is called the Microcosmic Orbit. We're just going to do simply for a moment to the count of 4. So it's, okay, we're going to empty our lungs. We're going to go. And exhale. And hold. Just those 3 cycles of breath. Be very still. And you may already notice that your peripheral vision is increased, that your centeredness has become more centered, that your hearing has increased. Just in those 3 breaths. To frame ourselves as if we are receiving the breath, and then to allow ourselves to inhale, to exhale, and to hold it. That simple triangle breathing technique, which you can practice in the car, when you're reading, when you're working, when you're on the computer. You can do it at any time. That simple breathing technique will immediately start to shift your consciousness. It will immediately begin the process of tuning that string that is your neshama, your soul. It is so powerful. Just forgetting about anything else, just that simple breathing technique. And to extend it longer and longer. You can set your phone at a timer to do it for 12 minutes. You're just going to inhale slowly, exhale to the same count, and hold it with your lungs empty. It's very powerful. If you like that, put a thumbs up. If you don't like it, put a thumbs down. If you want to explore it, whatever you want to do. Comments are always great because this is so hard to do just in front of the camera. But now I want to give you a little secret about that triangle breathing and how it is a part of Judaism, and it's hidden in something that every one of you knows. Every Jew knows. This technique is sitting there and it's hidden. When we are inhaling, looking right here. When we are inhaling, what else is happening? God is exhaling. When we are exhaling, God is inhaling. And when we are holding, God is holding. Think about it again as partnership. When we're totally in sync with God, when we are conscious that our inhale is not our inhale, but is in fact God's exhale of the Nishmat Chaim, the breath of life into us. That our exhale is not our exhale, but it's in fact God taking it from us, and that our holding is a place of faith and partnership. These 2 triangles overlay each other. That becomes what is incorrectly called the Jewish star. The real term of that is Magen David. Magen does not mean star, it means shield. It is the shield of David. Remember, David was a great singer. He understood breath work. He understood on every level the divine quality of breath work. And our ultimate shield is knowing we are in partnership with Hashem, partnership with God. So as we surrender into that breathing technique and God's triangle overlays to ours, we get this shield of David. It's hidden right there in plain sight. We've all seen the Star of David. We've all seen that 6-pointed star. By the way, that star, which we call the Shield of David, is called a star of life in the Yaqui Indian tradition. My friend at Soma Valencia, blessed memory, who was the former chief of the Yaqui, who was the chief of the Yaqui till he died, once gave me a beautiful beaded pendant with a 6-pointed star. And he said, this is the Yaqui star of life. And I looked at it, he goes, we have the same teachings. They have the exact same teachings in that tradition for the exact same symbol, that it's the same thing about letting God breathe into us and letting those two triangles overlay each other. And as far as we know, the Yaqui and the Hebrews were never anywhere on the same continent, let alone in the same space. So when we do this kind of breath, it allows us to open up to an awareness of God's shield. Orlando, would you pass me that piece of art, please, that needs to get framed? That Yuri and Natalia just recently won at our Hamantash and Hurl. We need to frame it for them. This was done by a man named Risk. Thank you so much. I don't know what I would do without Orlando. I don't know what any of us would do without Orlando. Thank you so much. This is a piece of art. It was the first Jewish piece of graffiti art by a man named Risk or Risky. And what's beautiful about it is, and Risk is one of the first people who've had graffiti art at Mocha and things like that. He did 100 serigraphs for us for the temple. This image of our breath and God's breath creates so much around it. And it really does open up so that the whole universe, it's just a beautiful Kabbalistic image, and he did it through meditation, is my understanding. Thank you. So, again, I want to pause for a moment now that we realize what the Jewish star, what the Magen David really is. Pause for a moment and let's take another breathing technique. Just try it for a moment and see how we experience. So sit up straight to your lungs. You can't have clenched fists because that's not receiving. You can't have crossed legs. That's not receiving. So as we sit here, as you sit however you're sitting, to inhale to a count of 4, exhale to a count of 4, and to hold it with your lungs empty for a count of 4. Now for a moment, you can close your eyes. My voice will probably still work. Before we even start, find the moment where the breath becomes yours. Reframe it so that you are not inhaling, but God is blowing into you. Focus on the moment the breath becomes yours as it's coming into you. Fill the lower lungs first. Lower lobes of the lungs, excuse me. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. When you think you found the moment, find the millisecond. When you think you found the millisecond, find the microsecond of just receiving breath. Let's try this meditation technique together just for a few breaths. So we inhale through our nose. We exhale. We hold. Hold. A little slower. Inhale. One more time. Just relax. Feel life around you. This, in many ways, is the simplest, most basic meditative technique. And like most skills, sometimes the simplest is the deepest. The most basic is the most opening. A musician who's a great musician still plays his scales, because even though he played them when he was 10, plays them when he's a 40-year-old musician, because he still does those exercises because they open him up to the greater levels of music. Same way, as we tune ourselves into this concept being breathed, having the shield of David, being a triangle. As we tune ourselves that way, we open ourselves up to receiving God's love and teachings. It's also a great technique to do prior to going to sleep. If you fall asleep, that's okay. But this triangle breathing is a great technique to do. It's amazing to do before you have an exam, before you have a test in business in whatever way, before you're doing an athletic competition of whatever sort, before you take a golf swing to be focused, or anything else. It's a great thing to do before you decide to paint or to sing. It's a great exercise to do just constantly over and over so that we tune ourselves up without any esoterica, without worrying yet about the verses, how we do this and that and this complexity and that complexity. This is a simple, straightforward technique that everyone can do to be in a receptive place, to be aware, focused, alert, conscious, to be able to say, Hineni, here I am. Practice that for this week. Now, there are two choices. You can say, oh, that's interesting. The rabbi said something interesting, and I'm going to sit with that and think about it. And then next week it becomes hard to build on that. Or you can say, you know what? I'm going to do this for 12 minutes a day. I'm going to do it twice a day for 12 minutes and see what happens. For many people, by the way, it's very uncomfortable when they hold with their lungs empty because of fear. Just have faith. You can always breathe. God will fill back up your lungs. And it's so important to just start with the foundation of this. You know, the stronger our foundation, the stronger our roots, the bigger the tree grows, the bigger the building, the stronger the building. This one technique is the Magen David, the shield of David, and has such an ability to help us say, Hineni, I am present. Now, next week, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing Facebook or Zoom, because I think we're going to look into the mysticism and hidden secrets of Passover, since Passover is coming up. And there's so much beauty that is hidden in the Haggadah and into the Seder and into the practices of it. And it might be, I think, more useful for people if we had questions in Zoom. So we're going to look and see if that technically can be done both in the Zoom and still on Facebook, still on YouTube. But we're going to try and do that for next class. We'll take time off during Passover, and because I'm with my family, and then we'll come back and do more of the mysticism, more of the meditation. We will discuss as well Jewish astrology, which is part of our tradition, part of our technologies, our techniques. We'll go into some more depth of an understanding of an experience of meditative techniques, and we'll go into more of an understanding of what do people mean when they say sphirot? What do they talk about with the four worlds? Those kind of concepts that you may have heard tossed around by people. You had no idea what they meant, or maybe you have the wrong idea what they meant. We will actually study those as well. So I want to thank you for being good to me and for being here at this time, and really encourage you. Take 12 minutes, just 12 minutes. That's all. 1/5 of an hour. That's it. Take 12 minutes a day. If you can, take 12 minutes a day, twice a day. And just be comfortable and practice that breathing technique of the triangle breath, receiving the breath, and then see how things change, both immediately but also over a period of time as your neshama, your soul, is tuned like a string instrument. Thank you. May we all be able to say Hineni whenever we're asked where we stand, that we can say we are and will always be present. Thank you for being good to me and being good to all of us and being here tonight. Shalom.